Hello and welcome to the Rested podcast. My name's Mark Selby. I love the theatre of travel, discovering the stories of journeys and learning how people use their travel time. There seem to be two periods in many of our lives when we demonstrate boldness and achieve the remarkable. The first is when we start out with youthful exuberance, enthusiasm, and a blissful ignorance of what is supposedly impossible. The second is in the afternoon of our lives, when there's experience, a degree of wisdom, little to lose, and hopefully the desire to make a lasting difference. Someone who made a difference in later life was the artist J.M.W. Turner. His drive to experiment is inspiring, especially from the age of 60 until his final exhibition at the age of 75. He'd achieved financial independence from his earlier work and wouldn't let critics divert him from his path. His experimentation in representing the emotion of what he saw lay the foundations for Impressionism and abstract art. His paintings of storms at sea and on land are remarkable. There's a story that he tied himself to the mast of a boat to appreciate the full power of the sea in a raging storm. It's unlikely this happened, but he certainly captures that power in many of his paintings. Two galleries in London contain most of his masterpieces: the Tate Britain beside the Thames on Millbank and the National Gallery in Trafalgar Square. I visit them often. A favourite painting is Rain, Steam and Speed, the Great Western Railway. It has an oncoming steam train speeding across the River Thames in a swirling rainstorm. It illustrates a period of change as the technology of the Industrial Revolution is making its mark on an agrarian world. Racing in front of the train is a barely visible hare. People on the riverbank below wave to the train's passengers, many sitting in open carriages in the rain. Jane Simon is believed to have been on that train. She was travelling between Exeter and Devon and London in a wild storm. She shared her first-class carriage with two elderly, cosy, friendly-looking gentlemen, one of whom she described as possessing the most wonderful eyes I ever saw. Somewhere near Bristol, this man asked her if he might lower the window to take in the scene, despite the torrential rain. She consented, and the man stuck his head out of the window for about 9 minutes. Deciding she wanted to experience the storm for herself, Jane followed suit and saw such a sight, such a chaos of elemental and artificial lights and noises I never saw or heard or expected to see or hear. Her new companion, meanwhile, leant back and closed his eyes for a time before announcing to the carriage that the experience had been worth getting drenched for. The following year, Jane visited the Royal Academy and saw Turner's new painting exhibited. "Imagine my feelings," she said. "I had found out who the seeing eyes belonged to." She then heard a voice behind her say, "There now, just look at that. Ain't it just like Turner? Whoever saw such a ridiculous conglomeration?" Jane turned around and said, "I did. I was in the train that night, and it is perfectly and wonderfully true. Leaning out of a window on the train he painted seems far more plausible than tying himself to the mast of a boat in a storm, and it's wonderful what the conditions can trigger." I was reminded of travelling in harsh weather, reading the memoirs of Liz's grandfather, Archibald. He was a doctor in Devon. His rural practice was 10 miles from the nearest town of Tiverton. He travelled by horse on his rounds, often riding 30 miles in a day. There were no telephones or electric lighting at the time. The poor roads and tracks meant riding was the best way to visit his patients, especially in the winter through storms and blizzards. He used to store medicines at pubs on his round for easy access when he needed them, rather than having to ride back to the surgery for supplies. His memoirs contain wonderful tales of patients' superstitions and expectations, These included the surprising benefits of road junctions. A child with whooping cough was taken up the road by its mother until they came to a crossroads. Then mother and child turned sharp right, but the whooping cough supposedly went straight on. The mother considered the child cured. On another occasion, he put a thermometer in a patient's mouth to take his temperature. The farmer looked at me very hard for some time when I took it out and said, "I don't feel no better for that." Archibald kept 4 horses for his rounds and hunting. They kept him mobile whatever the weather. And as we've noted before, Britain doesn't seem to have a climate, it just has lots of weather. It's regularly mentioned by Brits when starting conversations. There's so much to comment on, often to the bemusement of overseas visitors. We experience more weather firsthand when we're travelling than inside our homes or workplaces. It's not just the visual impact of the sun or feeling the elements on our bodies of warm, cold or wet days. It's also the smells of weather. That smell of early morning dew, of an approaching storm, the rising heat on hot summer days, and of dusk falling. It's a sensation we might ignore at the time, but it stays in our memory for ages. Listener Kevin in Copenhagen is an author. I'm grateful to him for highlighting the ease with which smells can be conveyed in novels, triggering readers' memories. It's not just the smell of a physical book, but what's printed on the pages inside. Returning to those horses, it's strange to think that car-free zones in cities were effectively introduced by Julius Caesar over 2,000 years ago. He decided the congestion and pollution of wheeled traffic in Rome was unacceptable. He banned carts and wagons from the city between dawn and dusk. The only exceptions were those carrying materials for construction or for sacrifices at temples. Carts that entered the city in the night were allowed to remove manure from the city during the following day, and there was plenty of it, from all those horses, donkeys and oxen pulling the carts. The law was applied to all Italian cities. 300 years later, those who deemed themselves entitled were gradually whittling away at Julius Caesar's visionary decree, gaining permission for just themselves to enter the city in a carriage. That sense of entitlement continues today. Introducing car-free zones remains a challenge, despite the positive impacts they have on safety and local retail sales. I think Julius Caesar would have called out the bullshit of delusional entitlement, just as he'd recognised the manure problem from carts and wagons drawn by animals when he introduced his law. The horse is an extraordinary creature. It became the principal engine of transport over time. Movement in cities came to depend on them, but their own motions became a serious public health problem. It culminated in the Great Horse Manure Crisis of 1894, when the London Times newspaper predicted, in 50 years, every street in London will be buried under 9 feet of manure. Now, as John Kenneth Galbraith said, there are 2 kinds of forecasters, those that don't know and those who don't know they don't know. Today, many planners still rely on their own forecasting skills when predicting future transport demand and design supposedly appropriate plans for neighbourhoods. Enlightened planners are rejecting that forecasting and follow a decide and provide approach instead, determining a preferred future with plausible risk scenarios, then developing a resilient strategy. Julius Caesar would have approved. Rather than simply following what has gone before, thank goodness for those individuals who challenge the norm to explore new approaches. The difference they make can be remarkable, as J.M.W. Turner demonstrated. Each of us can make a difference. I wonder what yours will be. Enjoy your travels. Thanks for listening to the Rested Podcast. Please subscribe for details of new episodes and tell your friends. I look forward to reading and sharing your travel stories. Please email restedpodcast@gmail.com. And my thanks to everyone that has contributed to Rested so far. Enjoy your travel time.